Hey everyone, we are here again. I'm back after a 2 week hiatus doing some research, but we're back now for our next episode of Sticky Notes Chat. And today we're discussing something that is so near and dear to my heart, and I think all our hearts, which is consulting. Consulting, the amazing, wonderful, slightly scary and intimidating, but yeah, for me, I've done it for over half my life. So it's pretty it's an amazing thing, and we're going to tell you about why it's an amazing thing, and also kind of some of those concerns, some of those stereotypes, some of those misconceptions, where you can say I'm a consultant, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you're a consultant, you're one of those." Um, but yeah, we've got here Chris Nutter, we have Amanda Stockwell, and we'll all be chatting, doing some sticky notes chatting. And of course, if you're, as you're watching this, if you have questions, certainly feel free to post those in the comments. We will try to keep an eye on them to some degree, and do our best to kind of stay on top. And if we miss it, we will hopefully respond a little bit later on when we catch up. Of course, you can find us on Twitter at Sticky Notes Chat, through email, chat at stickynotes.chat. And of course, you can just find all of us and follow all of us, where we'll be rotating the stream to each of our LinkedIn feeds, every Thursday at this time. So with that, consulting, what do you think? What is consulting? What does it mean to you?
What is consulting? Ooh.
Yeah, maybe we should start with what we mean when we say that. Because one thing that is people are like, what do you do? And depending on who it is, I say I'm a freelancer, I say that I'm a consultant, I say that I own a business. It depends. So maybe we should start there.
Yeah. And I mean, we have this kind of thing that we say, which is consulting, but what's in that? There's different things you do at different times. Sometimes you're a coach, sometimes you're a trainer, sometimes you're going in and just giving advice. So you're all of those different things at different points in the job. Yeah.
And I think we all carry different identities. There's some identities are work related, some are not. But even within that work related identity, I think I've got I'm a UXer and I'm a consultant, and sometimes they overlap and they mesh really well, and other times it's like, okay, to Amanda's point earlier, it's well, yeah, I'm a consultant today. I'm going to be helping you out with stuff. And that stuff is whatever you want it to be, as long as I know what I'm talking about, and hopefully I do. And if not, I'll let you know.
Let's maybe like the most
we
basic
just made it
definition.
More ambiguous.
Well, yeah, let's maybe do the most basic definition, which is that when I say consultant, at the very least, I mean, I don't work directly at a company. I am not like full-time embedded in a team. I'm not even like a part-time contractor. Means most of the time when I kind of roughly use the term consultant, it means I come on for project-based, and whether that project is a single day of team training or a 6-month engagement, I usually come in and kind of it might even be all of my time, or all of my time for a short amount of time, or a little bit of my time for a long time. But when I say consultant, basically the distinction I'm making is that I'm not a full-time employee, regardless of kind of the level or what I'm doing. And that's kind of like the most basic thing. Sort of that the first dichotomy is, are you full-time somewhere, or like full-time contracting, even if you're not a full employee, or are you kind of bouncing around from project to project, client to client, and kind of looking at it that way. So that's the first way that I kind of delineate that. And sometimes people are like, oh, so you work through a contracting company and you're like, will you be full-time with me for 6 months? I'm like, that's also not what I mean.
Well, I think that's because people differentiate, you're an employee or you're a not employee. If you're not an employee, then it doesn't matter. You're not an employee. You're not committed for the long term. And therefore, if you're a contractor, if you're in a staff augmentation kind of situation, you must be a consultant. But that's not true, to your point. Basically, it's if you're doing staff augmentation, okay, you're not maybe an official employee. Maybe they can say, okay, goodbye after your 1-year contract ends, but you're still not a consultant. A consultant is essentially, I would define it as a person who advertises their services to multiple clients simultaneously. When you're in a staff augmentation situation, you're basically saying, hire me, and they say, okay, we have a 1-year contract, and you kind of can go from 1-year contract to 1-year contract, just like you go 1-year job to 1-year job, or 2-year job, or 5-year job, or whatever. But it's you're advertising your services to the world, or to your geographic area, or whatever. And you can flit from project to project. It might last a month. It might last 6 months, though. I mean, it might last 6 months, but it's still not a staff aug situation, because you can still choose to do another project while you're doing the first project, and that's all good. Everyone has to accept that. So
one of the biggest differentiations probably came out of something like the Microsoft PermaTemp court case, where there was a bunch of people who said, well, we were treated like employees, even though we weren't really employees. And those were people who were, like you said, staff augmentation. They were being brought in to help the full-time people do their jobs. And they were being treated, they had desks provided by the organization. They had computers provided by the organization. They could do pretty much all the same stuff that the organization could do. That's typically not what what we're talking about does. A contractor, you're coming in as a vendor, you bring your own equipment, you don't get given an email account at the company unless it suits them rather than suiting you. You don't get given the benefits that the company has, or you might have access to the cafeteria just because they don't want you going off site when you eat lunch, because it's better to have you around. But you don't get all those kind of benefits of being part of the organization like you would as a full-timer. You don't get the organization providing for you like they would if you were a staff augmentation kind of situation. You're a vendor. You're selling a product to them. That product might be you. It might be you for a period of time, or it might be, I typically do my work based on, I quote for a piece of work rather than an amount of time. So, so in those situations, I'm literally vending a thing. Like, I will give you a design thinking workshop. I will give you a usability study, or whatever it is, and we agree what the deliverables are for those things, what the timeframes are for those things, what the cost is for those things, and it's a very distinct piece of work. And like you say, Cory, it could be a 6-month piece of work. It could be. I don't like doing those particularly, but yeah, we can get into that in a minute. But definitely, it's when you're doing this, it's something which you're doing as a chunk of work for a company, that you're being paid for that chunk of work rather than being paid to be there every day.
Yeah, exactly. And there's tons to unpack in that, in what you were just talking about. The idea, and all of these we can perhaps talk about, or as long as we have time, is the piece of work versus, hourly versus the piece of work, the fixed price contract. And I tip more towards hourly, and I literally just said this in a contract recently, where I wrote a proposal, and they said we have this amount of money, and it will be fixed price. Write your proposal, what you can do in that. And I said, and it was super vague. And I said, well, you know what? And I use these words: I neither want to win nor do I want to lose. I want to, say I will do this or this or this, depending on how long it takes. I'm not going to be faster or slower than what you would expect. But this is so super vague. So there's times, that I certainly want to do something hourly, but it could be both. And to your point about 6 months, I've done projects that spanned, or my biggest project anyway, spanned 6 years, but not exclusive.
Right.
It's not exclusive. It's just that the project just continues, and it renews and renews and renews and renews, and so on. But it continued. They're like, we're happy with you. I'm happy with the client. We're all good. Why don't we keep working together? This is fun. So.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, sorry, Chris.
Carry on.
I was going to say another thing that I feel like people ask all the time, to me anyway. I don't know about the two of you, but people are always like, "How do I price things if I'm going to freelance?" Because there's that whole hourly versus, sort of project based or like event based thing. And so I think, to go back to standard, I always say it depends, because it does, but I also think it kind of matters what you're getting into and how much experience you have. So, because one thing I wanted to kind of bring up with this whole consulting versus freelancing versus contracting thing is that a lot of people ask me if they should freelance as a way to get experience when they don't have a job. And I have thoughts, Cory. It looks like you have thoughts. And Chris, I'm curious about your feedback too. But let me give the 2-minute version, I think, which is that in order to be a great consultant, you have to have all of the basics and understand what you're doing first in order to offer value to another place. It is, in my view, a much better course of action to go work in-house somewhere, particularly if you have a team you could learn from and get some experience, and then try to, like maybe if you want to consult, you could do that on the side and then eventually move into it completely. But I think that because when you are a consultant, you are, or maybe you've got a team, but like you are the one they're going to for advice and answers and expertise. So if you don't already have that expertise, I think it sets you up to not do a very good job for the client who's hired you, potentially think that UX or UX research isn't as valuable as they thought, and not necessarily give you the experience or learning that you need along the way. So I always tell people that consulting and freelancing are really awesome options for some people, but I always suggest that the people who go after freelancing or consulting are people who already feel confident about their core skill set.
Well, so I will bifurcate that. I would say I started fresh out of college in consulting. However, I started with a consulting firm, which makes all the difference. Mm-hmm. I think I'd say it's okay to start in consulting as long as you've got a big consulting infrastructure that's not you. Once you go the freelancing route, if you don't have that expertise, then you can do it and they'll probably hire you, but your hourly rate or your project rate will be teeny tiny compared to what it would be if you could say, I have this expertise, I am knowledgeable, and they say, yes, you are knowledgeable. Okay, we'll pay you a larger sum to do the same work because you've demonstrated, because you've explained your expertise. And if you're a freelancer and you can't do it, then you're not going to get the revenue. But if you work at a consulting firm, they're going to say, so-and-so has just enough expertise, and we'll be working with so-and-so here who has lots of expertise, and together they'll do a wonderful job. And they'll say, okay, well, we'll pay like a nice blended rate for both of them because we've got the super expert there too.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant. Is like if you're an individual who's looking for a job, I don't think that freelancing is it's tempting, and I understand why people like look for that, but I don't think that it's a great place to start your career by freelancing.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the thing that tempts people into it is that they see rates that freelancers charge, and those rates look very tempting in comparison to potentially even a salary. But there's a thing missing from that. No, there's so many things missing from that.
Yeah.
If you aren't aware of things like the employer tax burden, which is separate from the employee tax burden, then you need to be aware of that before you start freelancing, because that is a pretty major chunk of the money that you think you're bringing in, or that you think these expensive consultants are bringing in, which they're not actually bringing in. Yes, they are being paid it, but that's because it's not something you see as the equivalent of salary as a consultant. It's something that gets taken away by the lovely government. And then, I mean, that's one thing. There's liability insurance. Which is actually probably one of my largest outgoings, other than taxes. There's believe it or not. Health insurance. Sorry, that is the biggest outgoing.
I was going to say you're missing one. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're in the US and there isn't a nationalized health service. I say that coming from the UK, where it's something that people go, "What, health insurance? Why do you need that?" So there's costs which, if you're looking at this in comparison to your salary, you're not thinking about those costs because it's something your company has already taken into account as part of your overall benefits package, if you want to look at it that way. Right. Those things all come out when you're doing it on your own. So the first thing that somebody's going to look at is that massive amount of money that we all charge to do the work we do, and they're not seeing what's actually involved in that. And so it's very tempting to set yourself up as a freelancer, even if you think you might have the skills. But that's not necessarily, it's not, oh, poor me, but that's not the way you should be looking at it. You need to think about all the other sums of money which you have to find a way of finding them, but you're not necessarily going to take them home at the end of the day.
Well, in real world dollars, I mean, you could say, and then thinking here in dollars, it could be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of stuff, of benefits that you're not getting. So you whatever you make, you subtract, and some of that's kind of fixed. It's not even like, okay, well, it's percentage of my salary. Like here in the United States again, payroll tax might be 15% instead of 7.5% of an employee, but the other stuff, the health insurance, is fixed. It's a fixed rate. So that certainly does need to be made into account, which actually raises one really important thing. If you are going to be a freelance consultant, you need to think like a business person. You need to think business. It's business. I love UX. UX is wonderful. But if you can't think business in a business mind, do we have your spreadsheets or your financial programs or whatever you want, you're not going to last as a freelancer.
Well, and I think that's a good point, that running a UX business is only about a third knowing how to do UX. You have to know that, and you have to know it in your sleep, and you have to be great at it. But you also have to know business development, and you have to learn, and you can learn it, but you have to know finance, and you have to make sure your taxes are paid, and you have to make sure that you're, if you end up hiring subcontractors, which I have done, and I think both of you have. I know Cory has, because he's heard me. But you have to manage all kinds of stuff other than just the UX work that you're doing. If you really want to kind of go all in and make it your business. If you just kind of moonlight from time to time on the side, you might be able to get away with just, kind of adding that to your existing salary or whatever and paying a few extra taxes on it. But if you're really going to make whatever it is your business, doing the actual work part of it is not you have to know that so well that you can just provide that without thinking about it. And then you have to either have acquired or learn those other skills around it, like the business skills.
And all the time that you're doing that administrative stuff and that business development stuff is time you can't actually do work. So that's another thing which kind of raises your hourly rate, is the fact that you're not working 220 days a year with a client necessarily, because you're also spending a lot of time doing other stuff, business development, quarterly taxes. Oh yes, everybody, it's quarterly. It's not annual, like if it's just your income tax. And then it's not just the federal taxes as well. If depending upon where you live, you'll probably have state and even city taxes to pay as well, because everybody wants a slice of the pie. So yeah, there's all this stuff that just takes time away from actually doing real work. I would never, I'd never do this as if it was just a hobby. If I wanted to keep it as a hobby, this would kill it dead as far as the fun part of it is concerned, because it's just not, it's not a thing that you can go into because you love it. Like you said, it's something you have to go into because you actually want to make a business out of it.
Right. Well, and I would say if that doesn't sound right for you, the listener here, there are plenty of consulting firms out there. So if you don't want to do the business stuff, there are small consulting firms that are a handful of people. I call my own business a micro business, which basically means there's two of us kind of technically on staff plus subcontractors. But if you say like a small business, it could be up to 100 people, 200 people on staff. And then you've got large consulting firms too. I mean, you've got all these like ginormous multinational consulting firms. It's going to I mean, you get benefits. It's going to regulate your revenue, and you're still going to be a consultant. But you're not going to be a freelancer, a business owner. So and your income will be stable, even if you end up on the bench, which means there's a project for you. And I did that with a large consulting firm, and I ended up on the bench for a month, which basically meant hang out. We'll pay you, and when we're ready, But even the bench doesn't last. So.
I will caution. I've worked at I've interacted with a lot of agencies where they don't give you a month on the bench. If there's more than like a week or so where there's not something for you to do. So one of the hazards of working at an agency is that very often the agency ties your salary to the project work that you're doing. So if there is no more project work, they might have a built-in couple of weeks, but they tend to, and I've seen this in lots of scenarios, lots of ways, pandemic notwithstanding, if they lose a project or they lose a client or one wraps up and they don't have something else lined up, agency life can be up and down. And pretty often your work, although you'll get a salary probably, and you'll probably have more stable income, you also are probably at the mercy of what the business can do. Hopefully they've got, a business development sales team themselves, and that somebody else is taking care of that, but it doesn't mean that you are free from the potential ups and downs of, kind of winning client work and stuff.
Well,
but I'd still say that that's a great way of getting into the idea of working in consulting or working in a freelance environment, because I did it. I mean, I worked with a consulting firm for 5 years, before I went out on my own. And that gave me a great insight into a lot of the things that that are part of working in a consulting business rather than working as just a member of a team in a regular organization, which then let me realize that, this is something I wanted to do full time for myself in the future. It's also a great way of finding out if you don't want to do it full time for yourself in the future, which is fine too. I mean, it was almost like a nice, easy way in, because I was still being paid a salary. It's then up to you to work out whether you prefer that salary and you prefer somebody else to do all the business admin side of things, or if you prefer to be able to control your own income a little more, if you think you can do better than you were doing when you were in the consulting company you were in. But it's a great way in. It's a great way of actually working out whether it's something you want to do.
Well, and I think it also that touches on what you're both talking about. It touches on the idea of safety. As a consultant, and there's two types of consultants, right? The in-house consultant in agency, or kind of freelance micro business owner route. Are you safer or less safe? Because there's a stereotype that you make more money, but then the moment the economy turns or things go down, your safety. Everything, the rug is pulled out from under you. I think we've touched on that a little bit before, but it happened in 2008. Saw those stereotypes happening now, and the answer is, again, what Amanda said. It all depends. It depends. If you happen to have a client stream or a sector or kind of an area, you might as well, you might get more work when things turn down, or you might get less work. It's really hard to kind of hard to say, one is safer or less safe or so than another.
It's true. And I mean, there's this thing that the financial advisors would say you should have about 3 months of backup money, safety money for a downtime or for an emergency. If you're in consulting, probably more a year, because you could have a bad time and you don't have a backup. You don't have a thing. Sure, you could always go join the regular job market. But yeah, if you don't want to be doing that, you need a way of looking after yourself for a period of time, which could be quite a long period of time. So Molly's asking, what are examples of UX consulting firms? Cory, who did you work for?
I mean, well, so when I worked for, well, actually, I've worked for the big and the small. Big, I worked with CSC Consulting, which doesn't exist anymore. It was bought by, is it Accenture?
Yeah,
or
one of
Sapient?
them. Yeah.
But so these aren't UX consulting firms, but consulting firms that do projects, and those projects have UX component. But the big ones I can think of, there's Booz Allen, there's Accenture, there's Anderson, is that still there?
Well, Anderson, do they still exist? KPMG, all those kind of people, they all have.
They get absorbed, yeah.
Yeah, they all, and I mean, they call it the big four, right? And they tend to be companies that do everything, but they will employ people as part of that to be UX.
Yeah. I mean, I also I've also worked for smaller UX centric consulting firms as well. In my time, and they're scattered mainly in bigger cities. I found, there's those, and there's, again, general consulting firms, even on the small scale, that have the UX component. They do they do some sort of digital something or other, and they have UX consultants among them too. So I mean, they come in all flavors, all shapes and sizes, and all places. Kind of they're everywhere. And then there's also, I'll throw in consulting practices within companies. So like you can have a big in-house kind of company, but they have a consulting arm that works and bounces from their project to their project. So you're still kind of sort of a consultant, but you're still in-house. So
Microsoft had a consulting arm that would go and do implementations, and that would often involve user experience. They've got a team in Reading that does in the UK who pretty much do user experience work for the Microsoft consulting stuff. IBM does the same thing. They've got consultants that don't work with IBM software. They work with clients to do the same kind of thing. And again, those are big companies. My experience, my 5 years, was with Nielsen Norman Group, who just do user experience consulting. They do training, they do consulting, they run conferences too. So they're, I guess, US based mainly, but they work worldwide. So yeah, they're not a large company. At the time I was there was, I think, 6 or 7 of us who were doing client consulting work. Now they're larger. But yeah, so different sizes. There's lots of options out there. There's lots of local and national and international companies at all sorts of different sizes.
I want to shift us for a second. We're kind of talking about like what it is and the flavors it comes in. But what about stereotypes? Stereotypes of consultants, and those can be of all flavors, not just freelancers, but of all flavors. What's out there?
Well, I know one that, and I've been on both sides of it, is that doesn't matter what the internal team is saying, a consultant come in and swoop in and say something obvious, and it gets more attention. And I will say that I have been on both sides of that. I have been internal at a company where we had consultants come in and say literally the exact same thing I had written in a report about 2 weeks earlier. And I was like, yeah, that sounds familiar. But I also have been on the other end of it, where I know I've been working with teams where they've been giving similar feedback. But if I said it as an outside person, it has kind of a shinier glow. And so what I'll say is that I'm not sure that that's a untrue stereotype. I think there's something to be said for sometimes feedback from the outside. It just is taken with a little bit different light. And so I'll just say that I like to kind of, I personally, the way I work is I'm super collaborative with the teams that I'm working with. So sometimes I actually do that on purpose. Sometimes I specifically ask them, hey, is there anything that you already know that you want me to raise? Or there's anything I could kind of highlight for you from this outsider's perspective. Because there's definitely something, for better or for worse, that when somebody from the outside of a company says something, I don't know if it's taken more seriously, but sometimes it's taken with a different weight than when internal people say it. So that's definitely something that I hear a lot, but I kind of try to take advantage of it. You just have to be careful, otherwise you can quite alienate team members who are like, yeah, I know, I've been saying that.
I mean, you can kind of as a consultant, you may feel alienated as well. You know, to the point of being the outsider, you've got to accept that you are the outsider, that you're, I mean, granted, you have other consulting colleagues or UX colleagues, you know, at your meetups or whatever, but when it comes to your clients, you're the outsider. So you've got to accept that. You've got to accept that they're going to see you kind of as apart from them. That if they say, you know, like you might hear, hey, we're all going out to happy hour, it's going to be great, but you're not invited. I mean, yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll be invited too, just, you know, you're around, and that sounds great. But you know, you have to be able to deal with that, to deal with being on the outside of the situation, not having deep work relationships with your clients, unless you can find them in another context or whatever. So it's something, you know, it's a true stereotype, you know, to some extent. And it's certainly true that, you know, the outsider can sometimes be seen as valuable, but then it can make you feel sad because no one wants to be as close to you as they are to each other.
And also, you never get to see things through to the end. Well, no, you often don't get to see things through to the end. You're coming in to give to help out with a specific point in the process, which is very different than if you're working on a team inside an organization where you're there for the long haul. And that's another sort of stereotypical consultant thing, isn't it? You come in, you what's it, the Seagull Metaphor?
Swoop
you fly in, you swoop in, you poop, and you swoop off again and fly off into the distance. And you leave the stinky pile of poop for the people who are inside the organization to deal with. Yeah, there's consultants who do that. That's terrible. But it's partly the nature of the job too, where no matter how much you try to engage the organization with helping them understand what it is that you're giving, what you've given them, what they can do with it, is up to them to do it, not up to you to do it, because you've come in from outside. And so there are going to be people probably who get given this report a consultant wrote and told to make it happen. I'm sorry when that happens. It's not what my intention is when I come in as a consultant. I'm not intending to do that to anybody, but unfortunately, I think sometimes it happens.
Well, I people will say to me, you know, well, we're curious, you know, when you make these, like as a researcher, when we make these recommendations, you know, how many of the recommendations do they take? You know, what happens like in stage 2? And often my answer is, I have no idea. You know, they hired me to do my gig, and then I left, and then yeah, that's it. You know, it was a one-time thing. They needed help. I helped them. I'm gone. I have no idea what happened. And you also, as a consultant, no matter what flavor of consultant you are, is, yeah, to your point, Chris, you may not see it through to the end. You may not even see it through to even partway, you know, towards the end. And you have to be at peace with that. You have to you know, it took me a long time to get to this point, but now I kind of tell myself I'm in it for the joy of doing the thing. And I'm not, and the thing is to solve a problem or to help try to solve a problem. But honestly, you know, if I've done my thing and I've done my best, that's good enough, you know, and I don't need to see it through. I don't need to push, well, what happened, you know, because I often can't, you know, and you have to be at peace with that to some extent.
Yeah. And I'll often put in the contract that I'll give people some consulting time subsequent to my engagement, where they can come back to me and say, okay, what you gave us was useful for these things, but we can't do these bits of what you suggested. So what can we do instead? And so I'll give them a little bit of time as part of the product that I'm selling them, where we can come back. And that's good for me too, because then I get to see what they've done. Yeah.
I would also say that that's one of the, you know, like when you're considering whether or not you want to consult, a pro and a con is that you are very frequently switching from one thing to another. And kind of the downside is you might not get to be as embedded in the team. You might not get to see what happens all the way through. But also, it means you get to work on lots of kind of different stuff. I'm a person who really likes the challenge of learning a new audience or a new thing. And so there's the kind of the pro con of it. But I try to frame that as, well, I can always, if I made good relationships, I can always reach back out to them and see what happened. But on the flip side, like right now, I'm working on a clinical trial database for cancer researchers. That's not something I've ever done before, and it's really cool. Yeah. And if I had just stayed working on one particular project, I wouldn't be getting to learn about this new other slice of things. So you have to kind of recognize that. And I think to go back to like sort of misconceptions people have, or just questions that people have about consulting, is they're like, well, like, how do you how do you balance like what would be good for you? Like, is it good or bad to always try new things? And it just depends what you're looking for. Like, some people are like, I am in fintech and I work on fintech and I'm super, super, super into that. And that is what I'm into, or whatever industry it is. And that's fine if that's what you're into. But for me, one of the pros of consulting is that I get the opportunity to take the knowledge I have about UX research and then I'd apply it in lots of different contexts. So I get to learn about like education, and I get to learn about like developer tools, and I get to learn about banks and financial institutions, and I get to learn about cancer research, and I get to learn about, like you get to learn about lots of different things. But everybody is into that. So you just kind of have to see like what works for you, and what are you like, how do you feel about that? I, for one, love that, but not everybody does.
And let's make a little point here, because you just talked about going through all these multiple different sectors. And one of the things we said earlier on was you should never get into the sort of freelance consulting gig if you don't have experience. What you're talking about there, Amanda, though, is experience in helping companies understand their user experience requirements, not experience in fintech and all those kind of things. What I found, what you guys have found too, obviously, is that you can still help a company even though you're not necessarily an expert in that area. You can still help them get up to speed with what they need to get up to speed with from the UX perspective, even if you can't do it from necessarily this perspective of their industry. Camera feed's gone. Let me put that back together.
We lost Chris, but that's totally a good distinction. There you are. But that's a good distinction, that you like the core skill set you have about UX or whatever it is that you want to consult with can be applied in lots of different contexts. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily need to know a lot about, banking or e-commerce or whatever. However, I would say, kind of back to that, like, you're looked at as an outsider. Sometimes, especially as a researcher, that lack of experience can actually help you be unbiased. So sometimes, as a researcher in particular, it's actually good to not necessarily know a whole lot about the existing norms or kind of the existing status quo in industry. So I try to use that to my advantage.
Because then you don't make assumptions. You don't make the assumptions. It could be also why I think people think we just start parroting back what they already told their organization. It's because we listened well when we came in, and we found those same issues that they knew were issues. And yes, those are the issues. But Oh, I've got another stereotype consultant. It's along the lines of that thing where they say, if you can't do it, teach it. Right? It's this idea that teachers can't actually do the thing that they're supposed to be training, which considering both my parents are teachers, I think they might have an issue with that. But it's the same kind of thing with consulting. Oh, if you can't hack it being in an organization, then you can always go off and be a consultant. Have you come across that one before?
I don't. I guess maybe I've like closed my ears so I don't hear. No, I haven't seen that one as much in my own world. But I think certainly there is something to that stereotype, where they say, well, if you're not working in house, then is there something wrong with you? Like what, why can't you go deep? What's wrong? And I'm like, no, I choose to go wide, not deep. And I want the wide, and I want to. Last week I was talking to car dealers. That totally cool. Very cool. I write about dealership stuff. Yeah, it's a choice, and people need to see it's a choice. So
yeah, I've done
I think
both. I
that
mean,
brings
I can do it. I choose not to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that brings up another thing that sometimes people ask about, like, well, why don't you work at a company and be, like you could be a manager or a director or a VP again or whatever. And I would say that actually by being a consultant, one of the reasons I choose to do it is so that I can keep my hands in the actual work. And I can, because I'm working with lots of different clients in lots of different contexts, like some of them already have, tools that they have already used. So I have to learn those tools. Some of them, they rely on me to make recommendations. So I have other things, but I get a chance to, and sometimes, again, kind of to the point, sometimes I come in and I'm training or coaching or doing sort of workshop things, but sometimes, a lot of the times I'm doing at least some of the hands-on work myself. And I feel like that makes me, well, for one, that's what I like doing, but I feel like, because sometimes people ask about it in terms of like, career progression. Should you try to be a leader in-house somewhere or try to be a consultant? And I don't think that there's really one that's better than other, except for you individually, what you value and what you want to be doing. And what I want to be doing is, working in lots of different kinds of projects and getting to work at lots of different organizations. But again, that's more about like personal reflection than it is about what's objectively better or higher or whatever,
I mean,
I look at, go on, Cory. Sorry.
I was saying my last job, before going off as a freelance consultant, I did 1 year in house, with a company as a usability director, because it was 2008 and it wasn't UX, it was usability back then, and a usability director with a small team of staff and a handful of subcontractors and a couple of organizations that were subcontracted for the massive quant stuff and stats, and that's when I kind of said, yeah, this was interesting to try, and now I want to, to Amanda's point, kind of be hands-on, be kind of get to do it myself. But that said, sometimes I think, it'd be fun to kind of mix it all together, grow the business. And I mean, I'm not saying I will, but I hold open that possibility of mixing the consulting and the kind of that kind of role where I was before in a different intermix. However, that said, I may just keep doing what I'm doing forever, and that would be just totally fine. But you really can kind of bounce around between the in-house leadership, the consulting leadership, the freelancing consulting, the in-house principal UXer kind of stuff. It's all good. You bounce around. You think about what's most intriguing.
And this is what Keith's asking, basically, is what you're talking about now. What's the pros and cons of having a career that spans in-house and consulting or agency work, and when's a good time to change? Cory, your answer is whatever intrigues you most, right?
What's good for you at the time? What makes sense from the economic standpoint? Like, are there jobs? I mean, I might want a job X, but maybe where I am is where I can stay employed. So there's external constraints, there's internal constraints or internal desires to change it up. And really it's kind of floating. And I mean, I would not want to say, I've been a freelancer since 2008 with, a company of two and some subcontractors. Therefore, until the day I retire, this is what I'm going to be doing. Maybe it's true, but I don't want to. I mean, there's things I definitely don't want to be doing now. But I can't talk about, the next, let's say, 20, 25 years of work, and say, I'm here and this is where I'm going to stay, but it's good for me right now. And if it turns out at some point it's not good for me, or the economy isn't good for me, or it turns out that it's not good, change it up a little bit and, take those lessons learned, try out different things. It's all good.
My experience with this was I just realized what I didn't want to do. I'd been working in what most people would consider to be an awesome job, doing user research work at Microsoft, working on several different teams, moving around probably every 18 months or so to a different area, even if it was within the same kind of group, working on a different team within that group or working with multiple teams in those groups. But I just didn't see a good career progression for me because I didn't want to be a manager. I didn't want to be managing a whole bunch of people. Mentoring, yes. Managing, not so much. So yeah, that's when I kind of realized that the bit I liked was the work I was doing, not the management side of it. And that's when consulting kind of lured me in, I guess. Yeah. So when's a good time to change was what Keith was asking. When you feel like it.
When you feel like it, yeah.
But when you've got enough experience to do it as well, I'd say. Because,
And when the external environment is suitable for you to do it. There's things way beyond our control, and it may be subtle and it may be more overt, but when the time is right.
Yeah. Amanda, what would you say about pros and cons of in-house versus consulting and when to change?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think some of it also is sometimes you're forced to make a change. I was laid off. Well, actually, the first time I started consulting, I moved from a full-time job that I really liked, but that I was moving away from the region. And so I was fortunate enough that I could still work part-time there. But I was looking for another job, and it just so happened that I had a bunch of friends at other companies were like, well, we don't need anybody full-time right now. Could you help us with this project?
Right.
It kind of evolved, and then I discovered that I loved it. Then the second time around, I, kind of bounced around a little bit. I had taken a full-time job, and then I got laid off, and I was like, well, here are my options. And so I think also just to say, like, yes, it's when it feels right to you, when you feel ready. I would say don't do it if you don't have a good network of people, because that's going to make consulting so much easier. We could have a whole other conversation about, how to get work and jobs in general, but the same is true for consulting as it is for getting a full-time job, which is that who you know is really important, and having already a solid network of connections is super helpful. And also just to kind of be honest about reflecting with yourself and what you really want and what would really work for you. Because there are lots of people, I think, there's kind of this shiny, like, ooh, I could be a consultant, and that seems really fancy and nice. And it can be really great, and I love it, but I know people really well who are awesome UXers or, UX researchers or whatever, but who would make terrible consultants. And so I think you have to be honest with yourself about, am I willing to do the biz dev part? Am I willing to do the, finance and logistics part? Am I willing to, am I willing to live with the instability of this week I'm way too busy and then I don't have a project for 3 weeks? And can you manage your own schedule? And what are you going to do if you have to hire contractors? And who might you partner with if there's other things that your client needs and all this other stuff? So you just have to kind of really be honest with yourself about, does it just sound good, or are you really actually the kind of person who's interested in that kind of thing? Because it's wonderful for me, and I think I can speak on behalf of both of you. Like, we do this on purpose because we like it, but not everybody is cut out for it. You have to be really honest with yourself about what you want.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. That's true. Whether you're working for a company or you're a freelancer. But I think, yes, it's in terms of happiness. I spend a lot of my time on work, doing UX work, and I think I'm happy. I'm happy with my job. I enjoy going to work every day, even if going to work is either often in my basement here, or in some other state, or sometimes some other country. The way it kind of just bounces around, it keeps me happy. It keeps me feeling good about what I'm doing every day, personally. And you're helping people as a consultant for sure, but also just kind of personally inside, saying I feel satisfied with my career, what I'm doing, how things are working out, and being able to do that, being able to find something like that is truly amazing.
Yep, I'd agree with that. I look at some of my friends, my peers who I worked at other organizations with at various points in time. Some of them are VPs of UX now, which is great. That role didn't exist before. And I'm thinking, no, don't envy you. Yeah. It's horses for courses, right? Everybody has a different thing. That's a very Britishism. It's different people want different things from life and different things from their careers, and I found the thing I like. So yeah, that suits me fine.
Right. So the advice to people, regardless of consulting or in-house or whatever, is experiment till you find what your happy place. And try different things. And if it's not a happy place, try to make it a happy place. And if you can't make it a happy place, try something else. And that's probably the best advice I think for anybody.
Wow, this turned into a real kind of self-help kind of session, didn't it?
I know.
You can do it. Yeah. So, well, good. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I would totally echo that advice. And with that, I would say, I don't know how we can top it with. Well, let's go out with the warm fuzzies.
Life can be good. Make it good by your experimentation or something like that. So, and even if the world is kind of collapsing around you, which might be happening, it's still time to experiment to the extent that you can, and to kind of be introspective and realize what you like and what you don't like, and what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And you'll find your happy place. So so I think with that, I think we're basically we've kind of covered all these great points about consulting. What it is, what it isn't, when you should do it, when you shouldn't do it, where it's stereotyped, what's true, what's not true. Yeah, so much stuff.
Yeah, it's another episode. If you aren't watching live, you might find more details. I'm not sure we've got anything to really post about this one, but the episodes are archived at stickynotes.chat, which is our website. I'm not sure we've got anything specifically to tell people in addition for this one, any other resources for folks. But I've never even really written blog posts or anything about being a consultant or those other costs that are involved in it.
So actually I should mention I've got 2 LinkedIn learning courses on consulting and freelancing. So
yes, you do. Yeah. Oh, Cory, come on.
So it's very subtle. If you want to watch those things, you've got some good stuff there. Maybe
we'll put some links to those on the Stickynotes website. Yeah, for sure. If people have other questions about it, they should get in touch with us. Email. You can follow us on LinkedIn, and that's hashtag for all the stuff that we do with this as well. Should we tell them what we're doing next week? Amanda, you're hosting this one, aren't you?
Yes, I think we are. So next week, we're going to talk about discount UX research and the sort of pros and cons in and how to successfully do sort of discount user research and usability techniques. So we'll have lots of conversation. We'll talk about some moderated stuff, remote stuff, which obviously is topical right now, and some kind of share some things to look out for as we're all kind of adjusting how we work. So it should be good. It should be a good convo, and let us know beforehand if you've got any specific questions or things you want us to cover.
Yeah, I've seen some contentious stuff around this recently. So yeah, if you're one of those contentious people, let us know. We'll try and cover those things. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, great. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks.
See you next week. Bye.